There are mountains that hold treasure, and there are mountains that demand blood in return. When I set foot in Potosí, Bolivia, I felt something beyond the cutting cold of the Andes. I felt the heavy silence of millions of souls who never return to the surface. They say Cerro Rico is cursed, that it devours those who dare to enter. And after descending into its dark belly, I began to believe. More than 14,000 feet above sea level, where the air is so thin that every breath hurts, rises a reddish conical mountain that dominates the horizon of Potosí. For centuries it was known as the richest mountain in the world. The silver extracted from its veins financed empires, built cathedrals across Europe, and turned Potosí into the largest and most opulent city in the Americas. But that brilliance came at a price paid in human flesh. It is said that 8 million people died in these mines since the 16th century. Enslaved indigenous people, Africans brought by force, desperate workers. All swallowed by the mountain. All turned to dust. I arrived in Potosí on a cold July morning, in the depths of the Andean winter. The bus snaked along dirt roads until a city frozen in time appeared before me. Crumbling colonial buildings, narrow cobbled streets, and above it all, the imposing presence of Cerro Rico. From any point in the city you can see it. Like a silent giant watching. Like a sentence that is never erased. I spent the first hours walking through the historic center, feeling the weight of the altitude, the constant dizziness, the difficulty breathing. Here everything is difficult. Even existing. In the Miners' Plaza, a small space surrounded by shops selling mining equipment, I met an older man named Don Felipe. He had sunken eyes, trembling hands, and a dry cough that shook him every few minutes. He told me he had worked in the mine for 32 years. That he had entered at 14 and left at 46, when his lungs could take no more. The mountain gives you food, he said, but it charges you with your life. It always charges. I asked him about the disappeared. He barely smiled. The disappeared? They're everywhere. In every tunnel. In every dark corner. The mountain never returns those it takes. That same afternoon I visited the witches' market, a place where amulets, dried llama fetuses, medicinal herbs, and all kinds of offerings for Pachamama and for LTO, the lord of the underworld, are sold. An older woman, wearing a traditional polera and felt hat, explained that in Potosí 2 worlds coexist, the one above where God reigns and the one below where the devil commands. When the miners go down they pray to LTO. Because down there the cross has no power. She sold me a package of coca leaves, cigarettes, and a small bottle of pure alcohol. Take this to him when you go down, she said. If you don't give, he takes what he wants. The next morning, before dawn, I met Don Miguel, a 48-year-old miner who had agreed to guide me inside the mountain. He was a thin man with skin weathered by sun and dust, his teeth stained from years of chewing coca. We met at the entrance to the Unified Cooperative, one of the many mining cooperatives still operating on Cerro Rico. He lent me a yellow helmet with a battery-powered lamp, worn overalls, and rubber boots. Don't touch anything without asking, he warned. And breathe slowly. The air inside is not the same. We entered through a narrow tunnel carved into living rock. The slope was steep, the ground uneven, covered in mud and stagnant water. The lamp barely illuminated a few meters ahead. Everything else was absolute darkness. I heard the constant drip of water seeping from above, the creak of rotten wood holding up the ceilings, and in the distance, the dull noise of metal carts dragging over rusted rails. The air smelled of humidity, of burned gunpowder, of something indefinable but ancient. Of contained death. We descended for almost an hour. Don Miguel walked confidently, without hesitation, like someone walking through their own house in the dark. I, on the other hand, stumbled constantly, trying not to think about the tons of rock above my head. In some sections the ceiling was so low I had to crawl on my knees. In others, so narrow that my shoulders brushed both walls. Claustrophobia began to climb up my throat. But I kept going. Because I came here to understand. To feel. To see with my own eyes what thousands of men have seen before disappearing. Finally we reached a wider chamber, lit by a flickering candle. In the center, a disturbing figure. A plaster statue of a man with horns, red eyes, and a devilish smile. LTO. He was surrounded by offerings. Bottles of alcohol, lit cigarettes, coca leaves scattered at his feet. Don Miguel knelt before him and murmured something in Quechua. Then he signaled for me to do the same. I left my small offering, the bottle of alcohol and the cigarettes, and felt a strange discomfort. I'm not superstitious. But down there, hundreds of meters underground, with the oppressive silence and total darkness around me, I began to understand why these men believe. Because when everything around you can kill you at any moment, you need to believe in something. even if it's the devil. Don Miguel told me that LTO is not seen as something evil, but as the legitimate owner of the mountain. Above, on the surface, we pray to God and the Virgin. But down here, LTO is the one who decides who lives and who dies. He is the one who gives the mineral, and he is the one who hides it. If you respect him, he protects you. If you offend him, he takes you. I asked if he had seen anyone disappear. He nodded slowly. Too many. My younger brother, 12 years ago. He entered a tunnel at dawn with 3 other companions. There was a collapse. They could never remove the bodies. They're still there, buried in the rock. The mountain kept them. If you've ever felt that same silence, type the word silence below. This journey isn't just mine. It's for everyone who has ever wondered what it means to be trapped between necessity and death. If this story grips you, subscribe, because what comes next goes even deeper. We continued through deeper galleries, where the heat began to increase and the air became almost unbreathable. On the walls there were marks. Names carved with knives or nails. Dates. Some from decades ago. Some recent. These are the ones who never came out, Don Miguel explained. They leave their name. So someone remembers them. I ran my fingers over one of the inscriptions. Jorge Mamani, 1987. Almost 40 years ago. A man who entered here young, with dreams, with family, with life ahead. And who never saw sunlight again. I wondered how many Jorges are here. How many ghosts inhabit these tunnels. We returned to the surface after almost 3 hours underground. Daylight hit me like a punch. My eyes took minutes to adjust. My lungs desperately searched for air. I took off the helmet, the overalls, and sat on a rock outside the mine, trembling. Not from cold. From something deeper. Don Miguel sat beside me and lit a cigarette. The first time is always like this, he said. You realize how fragile you are. How little you matter down there. We smoked in silence as we watched other miners enter and exit. Young men, almost teenagers, carrying sacks of ore on their backs. Bent old men coughing blood. Children selling dynamite at the entrance. That afternoon I went looking for the families. I wanted to hear the voices of those who wait outside. Of those who say goodbye to their loved ones every morning not knowing if they will return. I met Dona Rosa, a 52-year-old woman, a widow for 10 years. Her husband died in a collapse. His body was never recovered. Now her 16-year-old son enters the same tunnel that killed his father every day. What can I do? She said with dry eyes as if she had no tears left. There's nothing else here. Either you work in the mine or you starve to death. It's been that way forever. Since the Spanish arrived. Nothing changes. Only the dead increase. I asked her about the disappeared. She took me to a small cemetery on the outskirts of Potosi. Rows of nameless graves. Rotten wooden crosses. These are the ones they could get out, she explained. But there are thousands who are still inside. The mountain doesn't release them. It said their souls wander through the tunnels looking for the exit. That sometimes voices are heard. Footsteps. Knocks on the walls. She showed me her husband's grave. A simple headstone with his name and 2 dates. 34 years of life. He dreamed of getting our children out of here, she said. Of giving them education. A better life. But the mountain didn't let him. And now my son follows the same path. As if it were written. As if there were no escape. That night, back in my small hostel room, I couldn't sleep. The cold was intense, but that wasn't what kept me awake. It was the weight of everything I had seen. Of everything I had heard. I got up and went walking through the empty streets of Potosi. The city was silent. Only the icy wind blew between the colonial buildings. I walked to a lookout from where you could see the entire Cerro Rico, illuminated by the full moon. Majestic. Imposing. Deadly. I tried to understand the curse. Is it the mountain that kills? Or is it us, humans, with our infinite greed, our indifference to the suffering of others? For 500 years we have extracted wealth from these rocks. We have built empires with the silver of Potosi. And for 500 years we have sacrificed human lives as if they were disposable. Indigenous people forced into slave labor under the colonial Mita system. Africans brought in chains. Modern workers who have no choice but to risk their lives for a few dollars a day. The curse is not in the mountain. It's in us. I researched in local historical archives. The numbers are chilling. It is estimated that between 8 and 9 million people died in the mines of Cerro Rico from 1545 to the present. It is one of the greatest labor tragedies in human history. And it continues. Every year dozens of miners die in collapses, explosions, or from lung diseases like silicosis. Silicosis is especially cruel. It's caused by inhaling silica dust for years. The lungs harden, fill with scars, and slowly stop working. There is no cure. Only a slow and painful death. The miners of Cerro Rico call it the mountain's disease. They know it's killing them, but they keep going down. I met Marco, a 15-year-old boy who works in the mine after school. He told me he wants to be a lawyer, that he studies in the mornings and works 5 hours every night underground. I need the money to pay for my books, he explained. My family is poor. If I don't work, I can't study. I asked if he was afraid. He shrugged. We're all afraid. But hunger is scarier than death. He's 15 years old. He should be playing soccer, dreaming about the future. Instead, he's inhaling toxic dust and risking his life in unstable tunnels. I wonder if he'll reach 40. I wonder if he'll ever be a lawyer. Or if, like so many others, he'll just be another name carved on a dark wall. What came next would test everything I thought I knew. If this story has gripped you so far, consider subscribing. The journey only gets deeper from here. The next morning I decided to return to the mine. But this time alone. Don Miguel had given me permission to enter an abandoned tunnel on the east side of Cerro Rico. Be careful, he warned. No one's been in there for years. It could be dangerous. I loaded my lamp, a bottle of water, and entered. The silence was even denser than before. There were no voices, no machinery noise. Just the echo of my own footsteps and the accelerated beating of my heart. I moved slowly with every sense alert. The tunnel was old, with rotting wooden beams and a cracked ceiling. In some spots there were partial collapses I had to go around. In others, deep pools of freezing water. After walking for almost half an hour, I reached a small chamber. And there, on the walls, I found something that froze my blood. Hundreds of names, carved into the rock with improvised tools. Some almost erased by time. Others still legible. And next to many of them dates. Entry dates. But no exit dates. I realized what I was seeing. This was a place where men knew they were going to die. A place where they left their last mark on the world. A silent scream from the depths. I was here. I existed. Remember me. I read some names aloud. Juan Quispe, 1923. Antonio Condori, 1954. Pedro Mamani, 1978. Luis Choque, 2001. Generations of men. Centuries of death. And the mountain still stood, indifferent, eternal. I felt the unbearable weight of the mountain on me. The tons of rock. The centuries of suffering. The silenced voices. For a moment, panic invaded me. The tunnel seemed to close. The air became denser. My breathing quickened. I had to lean against the wall and close my eyes. Breathe. Count. Calm down. But in that moment of vulnerability, I understood something. The curse is not the mountain. The curse is us. Those of us who build systems where a few live off the wealth extracted from the blood of many. Those of us who look the other way while others suffer. Those of us who accept injustice as if it were inevitable. I left the tunnel with trembling legs and a tight chest. Outside, the sun shone on the perfect cone of Cerro Rico. Tourists took photos from the plaza. Street vendors offered souvenirs. Life went on, indifferent. I took off the helmet and breathed deeply the cold air of the altitude. And for the first time in a long time, I felt gratitude. Gratitude for being able to leave. For being able to go. For having an option these men never had. I spent my last day in Potosi walking the streets, talking to people, listening to stories. I met a 60-year-old former miner who had lost both lungs to silicosis and now lived connected to an oxygen tank. He told me he had no regrets. What good would regretting do? I did what I had to do. I fed my family. I educated my children. That was my life. I asked what he wanted the world to know. He thought for a moment. That when they use their cell phones, their computers, their silver jewelry, they remember. Remember that everything comes from somewhere. And that in that place someone paid the price. That night I took the last bus out of Potosi. As the city receded through the window, I looked one last time at the dark profile of Cerro Rico against the starry sky. A mountain that has fed the world for centuries. And that has devoured millions in the process. A mountain that is neither good nor evil. It is simply indifferent. We are the ones who give it meaning. We are the ones who create the curses. I think of Don Miguel. Of Dona Rosa. Of young Marco. Of all those who are still there, entering the bowels of the earth every day, knowing they might not come out. Why do they do it? Because they have no choice. Because the system is designed that way. Because the wealth of some is always built on the sacrifice of others. And as long as that doesn't change, the mountain will keep devouring. There are places in the world where history never stops bleeding. Where past and present merge in an endless cycle of suffering. Potosi is one of those places. I came here seeking to understand a curse. And what I found was something far more disturbing. There is no curse. There are only consequences. Consequences of 500 years of exploitation, of greed, of indifference. The mountain is not cursed. We are. So what do you think? Would you take this journey knowing what I know now? Share your thoughts below, and if this story moved you, subscribe to join me on the next one. Until then, stay curious, stay brave, and never stop seeking the truth.